This year, one of my major goals with my art practice is to start a sketchbooking practice. I want it to be a daily sketchbooking practice so that I just get into the habit of creating art and enjoying the process. So, in today's video, I'm going to take you through the process of painting one of the pages in my sketchbook. Hey there, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Shivani, and I'm a gouache artist and creative entrepreneur based in the sunny city of Chennai in the south of India, which is why you'll see me sweating in most of my videos, and I apologize in advance for that. So like I said, I've been working on developing a daily sketchbooking practice because I tend to be the kind of artist who always wants my art to be perfect. When I create something, I want it to be the final piece, and I'm trying to let go of that perfectionism a little bit, create more art just for the fun of it and just for the sake of creating it, and also to just start creating more often, so that in the process of doing that I improve my skills as an artist as well. So I've been having a lot of fun in my sketchbook lately. You may have seen some of these if you're following me on Instagram, but I've just been trying to practice in my sketchbook more often lately, and this is what you're going to see me create in today's video. The sketchbook I'm using is the Etcher hot pressed watercolor sketchbook. I'll link to it in the description below. It isn't available in India, which is where I'm from, but I got it down from the US as a set of 3 sketchbooks. So it came in an A4, A5 and A6 size. I bought the horizontal ones, and they have a lot of options. So they have vertical ones, and they also have a cold pressed option. So I really like the hot press texture because it makes it easy for me to scan my gouache work if I want to. But if you prefer a little bit of texture, then cold press is a great option as well. Anyway, so this is the sketchbook I'll be using. Oh, and I forgot to mention, it has a canvas blank cover, which is really cool because you can even paint on the cover and make the book truly your own. I have some new acrylic paints that I've been wanting to try out, so maybe I'll create something on the cover and create a future video showing you the process of that as well. For now, let's jump straight into today's video. So for today's sketchbook exercise for myself, I've already drawn out this set of 3 mushrooms. I used a reference image of the internet, which I'll either show on the screen right now or I'll add the link to it in the description just so you can see what the reference image looks like, and just note that it's not an original composition. And whenever you're using reference images for your art as well, make sure you're crediting where it's originally from and not trying to pass it off as your own composition. Just some ethics of being an artist. So here I've got my gouache palette with all my colors laid out. If you'd like to see how I set up a palette like this and why I use a palette like this, I've done an entire video on that which is linked above. You can check that out. I have my brushes here, and again, if you're interested to know more about gouache brushes, I have a video about that which you will find linked in the description, and I'm linking it above as well. I've also got my water jars here, which are probably not in the frame. I've got a palette knife because sometimes I find that it's easier once I've started painting, and when my brush is dirty, it's easier to just take out colors from this using a palette knife. I have my permanent white here because I prefer to take that straight from the tube, so I don't put it into this palette, and I have a mixing palette here. Sometimes I also use this little eyedropper tool to take some water. So I basically fill that with a bit of water, and then I can just release drops from here into my palette, which makes it easier to add water into my gouache without adding too much water in one go. So the consistency is something that people tend to struggle with gouache. Again, have a video on consistency as well linked above if you'd like to watch that to get to know the medium a little bit better. So for now, I'm just going to start painting this. If there are any important pieces of information, I will share them with you along the way. For now, I'm just going to take a warm red from my palette, which is my Spectrum Red. I'll take a bit of that. And very importantly, I also have a waste cloth with me, so I can keep using that to clean my brush, remove excess water, and also clean my palette knife between the process, so I don't have to get up and wash it every time. I'll probably be using my Princeton Heritage size 4 round brush for this. Additionally, I'm also going to take some of my warm yellow, which is Permanent Yellow Deep. It's a warm yellow because it's a very orangish toned yellow and it has a bias towards orange. And I'm just going to take a little bit of blue onto my palette as well. I'm trying to decide whether to go with the warm blue or the cool blue, but I think I will take a bit of the warm blue, just a little bit. By the way, this is one of my earlier sketchbook compositions. It's a little goldfish and I really love how it turned out. I've been practicing more with expressive brush strokes and slightly exaggerated color to bring a lot of character to the piece, and I really love what this little green reflection here is doing for the piece overall. Okay, great. So I think I'm just going to get started. I'll just put out some white also on my palette and I'm going to get started with painting it. Before I paint, I always like to lighten my lines so that they don't show through the paint. So I'll just lightly go ahead and erase over my pencil lines. Hopefully you're still able to see it on the camera. But don't worry, as we paint, everything will become clear once again. I always have this little bit of performance anxiety when I'm starting a new piece, especially if I'm recording it to be posted on YouTube or on Instagram. I just immediately start freezing up and I'm scared that it won't turn out how I hope. And this year I just want to look past that and start painting more. I don't want that to be what's stopping me from creating the pieces I want to create. I'm just going to make peace with the fact that sometimes it may not be good, and hopefully you all will understand that and forgive me for pieces which aren't so great, but it's all part of the process and I think it's important to just make peace with that and move past that, and don't let the fear stop you from creating more art. I think that's what's most important at the end of the day. So to start off with, I'm just laying down a base layer of this Spectrum Red. I'm using it a lot more watery than I would normally use gouache because I'll be layering over it. To be honest, once I get started painting and once I get immersed in a piece, I sometimes forget to explain it into the mic. So if there's any part of the process that you'd like clarification on, or you'd like to know how I did something or why I did something, please feel free to just drop a comment anytime. I'll be happy to answer you on the comments. Like I was telling you earlier, this year I do want to do a lot more sketchbooking and just random practice pieces, just painting whatever catches my fancy, whatever I feel like. And I'm thinking of recording those process videos a lot more to share with all of you here. So if that's something that would interest you and if you want me to do more of those videos, please drop a comment and let me know. That would give me an indication that I'm on the right track with my thinking, and I'll definitely plan to do more if that's something you all would be interested in. Got some paint on my finger and unfortunately that's kind of smudged through the piece, but I'll fix that later on. That's the great thing about gouache, especially for a messy painter like me. I love that I can just go and fix mistakes later on by just layering over them, and I tend to make a lot of mistakes like that. So it's definitely well suited for a clumsy painter like me.
Sometimes if you're struggling to create a nice clean layer over your base layer of gouache, it could just be that your base paint is still wet. So that's a creative decision that you could take. If you want the color to be blending a bit with the base layer, which is what I'm doing right now, then you can choose to paint over wet paint. That is when it's kind of semi-dry or partially dry. But if you want a really clean layer where there's no blending happening, then it's best to wait until your paint is completely dry before you go over that and try layering. While this dries and before I do anything further, I'm just going to start working on the stalks of these. So the first thing I did for the stalks was mix up a kind of cool grey brown sort of color. So it's really light. Gouache, when it's wet, it looks lighter, especially the light colors look lighter than they actually are. So as it's drying, you will be able to see the color better, but it's basically a cool grayish color, and I kind of created that by using a lot of white and using the primary colors. And that was it. As you can see, I didn't add in any black or anything of that sort. If you're interested in color mixing and just understanding better how colors interact with each other, I have a color mixing mini course called Pigment of Your Imagination, which I'm linking in the description. You can check that out. And I also have loads of video content on YouTube. I have an entire playlist on color mixing that you can watch, and it will definitely help you improve your skills as a color mixer. What I've really been enjoying about exploring this looser and more expressive style of painting is starting to really understand color and reflections and how you can take like artistic license and exaggerate certain things in your paintings, but then still get it to look very realistic and still get people to understand what you're trying to depict or convey through your painting, while also steering away from your reference image after a point and really, bumping up saturations in points and bumping up shadows and highlights and really making the painting more interesting in that way. And so much of my exploration of all of those things has come from really diving deep into color and understanding how light behaves, and therefore how the color choices that you make in a composition really change the end result and can make it so much more artsy and interesting and all of those things. now that I've laid out a lot of my shadows on the stalks, I'm just going to use a wet brush to reactivate parts of the paint and blend where I want to. When you're blending, you might get confused when it looks something like this, because these two colors look completely different, but just allow it time to dry and you'll see that sometimes the colors aren't really as different as they seem to be. So wherever you want to just make your edges softer, where you've overlapped one color on another but then you want it to have softer edges, you can just use a damp brush and kind of work at the seams to just soften that out. If you prefer painting in a style where you have these more sharp edges, then that also is completely fine. That has a different look of its own, so it's completely dependent on what your style of painting is and what you want to depict through this piece. So I'm now on day 2 of this painting. There are a few things that I may want to fix, or not really fix, but just enhance a bit. I just feel like the shadows aren't doing justice. I want much deeper shadows, so that's something I'm going to be looking into today. And then I'm going to add a bit of detailing on the mushroom caps and adding the background. So what I'm going to first do now is add in the background colors, because then that will tell me what I can do to make the mushroom really stand out from the background. So before I do the final touches on the main subject, I'm going to finish the background. So let's start off with that. So these mushrooms are basically growing in a forest floor. So that's going to be very muddy looking, and some fallen leaves and things like that. I'm not going to clearly define them, but I'm going to add markings that are indicative of them. And above this line here is the forest itself. So that's not going to be the sky. So it's not going to be a blue, but rather some greens, because there's all the forest trees and shrubbery growing from there. The forest floor itself, I wanted to have a very purplish tinge, like a muddy purple. So the way I'm doing that is by mixing up a muddy purple using this blue and this red. I'm using ultramarine and spectrum red. And like I said, if you want to know more about how to identify which colors to mix to get exactly the colors that you're after, I'd highly recommend checking out my mini course called Pigment of Your Imagination. You'll get all the information that you need to start mixing colors like a pro. So like you can see, this is not mixing a very bright purple, it's a very muddy purple, and it has more red than it does blue at the moment, which isn't what I wanted. I actually want more blue in it, so I'll be adding that in, and I'm adding a touch of yellow to that. I always like working with a limited palette, and I like exploring the possibilities with my primary colors without necessarily mixing in any browns or blacks, even when I want to get neutral colors. So I feel like I need a lot more blue here. I'm just going to take some of this aside. So this time, like I mentioned to you before, I'm using this eyedropper to just add 1 drop of water at a time into my paint. If I dip my brush in, firstly, I fear losing too much of the paint that's on my brush. Secondly, I just don't want to pick up too much water by mistake by dipping my brush into the water. Okay, so I've got a nice muddy purplish color. I will be adjusting this a bit more as we go, but for now I'm happy with that as a starting point. And I'm just going to start filling that in. And as you can see, for the background I've shifted over to my Princeton Heritage Angular Shader. So this is a 3x8 inch angled brush. An angled brush is similar to a flat brush in that it helps you cover larger areas faster, but at the same time, compared to a flat brush, an angled brush really helps you get into the nooks really easily. Now I'm just mixing up a foresty green for the back. For that I'm just taking a bit of permanent green middle and I'm going to add a bit of this purplish mix that we have into that. So this gives me a very muddy, foresty, brownish green, and I'll just apply a thin coat of that first before creating a slightly brighter green. I'm just taking a few brighter tones of green and adding those in. I just want it to be a kind of blurry looking background indicative of the forest that's behind this main subject of the mushroom, without really diverting the viewer's eye from the mushrooms themselves. But at the same time, I want the background to do the job of kind of setting the scene. I'm quite happy with that. I'm just going to add now some lighter and brighter greens on the forest floor itself, just to show these little bits of fresh shrubbery that's growing from the ground. So now I'm going to come back to my mushrooms themselves and see how to add in the final touches and really make them pop and stand out from the background. The first thing is that I definitely want more deeper shadows happening on the stalks, and I want to define these frills a little bit better. And I also want to add more highlight. So right now the highlight has been done with a slightly grayish white, but I want to do some pure white as well in the highlights. So here you can see I touched a bit of blue onto the stalk by mistake. So I'll show you how to correct mistakes with gouache. So I'm just taking a damp brush. I've not added any color. I touch the paint, lift it off and wash that off, and I'll just keep doing that. And then I'm just blending it into the back once enough of the color has been lifted off. And finally I will be doing some touch up with fresh paint over that as well. So this purple was a mix of the three primary colors with more of red and blue, which is what makes it purplish. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to add some more yellow into that, just to make it more brownish. So this is a neutral tone using the three primary colors which have been used across this entire composition. I'm adding a bit of white into that. Okay, so this gives me a pretty dark color that I can use for shadows, and I'm just going to add that over the shadows which I've already created. One important instinct to develop when you're doing these kind of gouache pieces where you're blending over the composition is to start becoming very aware of how much water is in your brush and when you need to get some of that water off your brush. That's very important, because otherwise you're going to end up adding way too much water into your painting and making a mess, which can be a little hard to correct, but with practice you'll be able to develop that instinct. I'm a lot happier with these shadows now. You can see how much more depth I was able to create in the final output just by making these shadows deeper. Okay, now I think the main thing left to do is to add some white, and then I'm going to make some corrections to my background because there are some parts of it that I'm not very happy with. So I need to first squeeze out some white paint, and as you can see this tube is almost empty. So I'm going to use this little thingy that I have that is called a paint extruder, I think. So you basically just attach your tube there and roll this little thing over it, and it does an amazing job of squeezing all the remaining paint out of your tube. It makes the tube completely flat. I've pushed that all the way up. Roll this back down. Look at how flat it's made the tube. It does a really good job. I was quite surprised with it. So that's going to help me very easily take out a lot of the remaining paint from my tube. Okay, so now I am going to use this to create those white details on the mushroom caps. Not sure what those are called. And I'm just going to quickly add some highlights onto the stem as well. going to make this whole thing look like that mushroom emoji at the end of it. Okay, so I really love how that's looking. However, I'm going to say that I'm a little disappointed with these yellows that I've added in the background. While they are kind of reminiscent of the actual scene that I was referring to, the yellowing leaves that have fallen, I find that within my composition and within the colors that I've used, they are definitely distracting and they're taking away from the mushrooms and they're not working in harmony with the composition. So I'm going to go ahead and fix that. Still not sure what I'm going to do to fix that, but let's see. I'm just going to go with my instinct. The first thing I'm doing is just taking some burnt umber and mix that into this yellow that I have on my palette, thinking maybe something like that would definitely work better and not be as distracting, and at the same time it would still remind you of kind of fallen leaves on the floor, which is all I want to achieve, even if it's not in the same colors that I referred to. So that's completely fine. I'm sorry if I'm mumbling in parts of this video. I'm not sure. I'll try to bump up the volume where I can, but sometimes when I'm painting I get a little lost and find it hard to maintain conversation at the same time. But it's fun. This is the first time I'm recording something like this. Let me know if you like this style of video. I'll try to do more of them in the future. It feels like I'm chatting with a friend while I'm painting, so that's fun. I'm definitely enjoying that part of it. Even with these greens now, I'm just trying to tone that down a bit because I do feel it looks a little harsh and extremely bright, which I do not want. There's so much intuition involved in painting in a style like this, and no matter how hard you try to just wake up one morning with that intuition built within you, I have come to understand that nothing can compare to just practice, just sitting, facing the blank paper, practicing over and over again, analyzing what you did, analyzing what went wrong, how you'd like to improve, and just being okay with sometimes making things that probably aren't your best work, or sometimes things that you're not all that proud of. Just becoming okay with that is such an important part of the process. So much better. Not really sure what I did there, but I do like it. and that's what's important, I guess. Now similarly in the green portion, I do want to cut down a bit of the brightness. So again, I'm going to take some burnt sienna, burnt umber, and just see what I can do with that. And some of you may have preferred the brighter background, and when you're painting, maybe that's the creative choice that you would make. And that's the beautiful thing about art. I think there's no right answer or wrong answer. It's so much a matter of choices. In every moment, we're just making choices based on what feels right to us and our own artistic intuition. And I think learning to listen to that is one of the greatest parts in the journey of being an artist. So if somebody else doesn't like something that you like, as long as you create it out of your intuition and as long as you feel that is true to your own artistic voice, it's perfectly fine. There is really no right or wrong answer. And for me today, this was the right answer, and I think I'm very happy with how that's turned out. You can see the pictures of my work on Instagram. You can follow along on my journey there as well. I take polls on what videos I should create and stuff like that. So do come there, join the conversation. It'll be so much fun to have you there. Join my newsletter if you'd like weekly updates on what I'm up to in the studio, what I'm thinking about, what I'm reading, what I'm listening to. All of it goes out in my newsletter, which is content I don't really share anywhere else. And all the other resources about how you can learn from me or connect with me are in the description. I also take Skillshare classes. I did one on color mixing recently, which a lot of people are loving. So please do check out all the links in the description.
I hope you enjoyed watching that, and if you, like me, are a perfectionist, or if you find it really hard to let go with perfectionism in your art, then I would highly recommend starting a sketchbooking practice. It's been really therapeutic and I've started enjoying it and looking forward to spending some time with my sketchbook every single day. For now, if you'd like to watch another video of another painting that I created in my sketchbook, which is this fun orange painting, then go ahead and watch this video right here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.